You know, it's interesting because as a sports fan, I knew a lot about all of the accolades around your sports endeavors. We talked backstage a little bit about Indiana University and being coached under the general. You know, Indiana University had a great run, participant in one of those runs for a national championship in college basketball, and then drafted by the Detroit Pistons and played the entire career with the Detroit Pistons, which now is, you know, fairly unusual. But, you know, I think just let me read some of the stats. So career stats, 18,822 points, 19.2 points per game, 9,061 assists, 9.3 average assists per game, and 1,861 steals, 1.9 steals per game. Just incredible. And, you know, I think when I look at everything that was done, I mean, you know, look, it's whether it's 12-time NBA All-Star, named to not only the 50th anniversary team, but also the 75th anniversary team, obviously a Hall of Famer, but it's your business activity. So what I'd like to do is just to have everyone clap it up for the accomplishments on the sports side before we get into business.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Easy.
No, it wasn't easy. It was a lot of battle scars. But you know, I met somebody who was from Michigan. She said she was a Piston fan, so I wanted to thank her for, you know, all the cheers and the prayers along the way, because, you know, we were battling, you know, some of the best in the sport, some of the best who's ever played the sport. When you talk Magic, Kareem, you know, Bird, you know, Jordan, those teams, they were really, not only were they great players, but they had great teams. So overcoming that, you needed prayers, you needed cheers. There's a lot of heartaches along the way, but you needed people to pat you on the back and say, hey, you can do it, get up, try again. So I thank all the fans and all the people from Michigan who may be in the room who helped inspire us.
And let's also point out, it was a different era of basketball back then, right? So to be a one, you know, a one or a point guard, small guard, it was much more physical style of play. The refs let a very physical style of play happen. And obviously, you know, Detroit, known to the bad boys, right, was a very active participant in that style of play. But, you know, we always, at least I've got enough gray hair to remember those days. And, you know, I think all of the players today obviously are tough, but it was just a different level of intensity back then. Could you just reflect on that a little bit?
Well, I think it was a different level of intensity and physicality, you know, across the board in all of society. Not only just in basketball, but even in baseball at that time, even in football at that time, the level of physicality that was allowed, and even the way, you know, parenting at that time, right? So coming out of, you know, 50s, 60s, you know, those were difficult times in the U.S. They were difficult time for, you know, race relations. So everything that you see that happens in society, you know, sports kind of mirrors society. And when you look at the physicality that was happening back then, it was about, you know, the land of the giants, you know, how big and how strong were you, and how much, you know, how much pain could you deliver? And for people such as myself, it was about, okay, how much can you endure? How much can you take? And that's how we measured, you know, our heroes back then. Like, you know, how much pain can you endure? How much pain can you take to persevere, to get to that next level, to become that champion? You know, we didn't want to see the easy path, right? We wanted to cheer for that person, he or she who was having that difficult time, that fall, that get up, that fall, that get up, and then they make it, right? And now it's different. It's different. You know, the sport is different. I think from a competitive standpoint and a physicality standpoint, you know, when there's resistance, right? When there's resistance in the sport, it forces you to go to another level and find something within yourself. That's what coaching used to be about. That's what, persevering used to be about. That coach would be able to reach down and help you find something in yourself, or that good teacher, right, would help you find something in yourself and make you believe, like, okay, I didn't know I had this. Like, I remember teachers coming in the room, and I know all of you have probably experienced this, but teachers used to come in the room, and they would see that bad kid, right? And the teacher would say, that's the one I want. Let me have him, or let me have her, right? Now, it's a little different. They want everybody to be good. Everybody's not good.
Yeah, indeed. Your ability, and I discovered this backstage, your ability to be able to intertwine the landscape around what's happening in the world with sports, I find to be really fascinating. So I just want to point that out. We had a really interesting conversation about kind of some analogies, with sports and basketball in particular, and how it could be applied to race relations and, structural racism. And I found that really fascinating to be able to understand some points that I didn't know. So I appreciate your ability to not be one-dimensional and actually show the ability to kind of take some very complex concepts and be able to express them in a way that's very relatable, because most of us can understand the sports analogies.
Well, thank you for that. And again, sport is, sport is the place where we go to really have the difficult conversations, because sport is the place where, supposedly the playing field is level. You have an audience that's watching. It's live, and you have officials that are officiating. So, pretty much the game is kind of fair, right? There's some individual biases that come in along the way, but pretty much, everybody is watching and they get to see. And sport is the only place where you can bring the Democrats, you can bring the Republicans, you can bring MAGA, you can bring, the Black Panthers. You can bring them all to Madison Square Garden, put them in one building, and they either root for the team in blue or they root for the team in red. And everybody's in that arena together. You got Catholics, you got Muslims, you got everybody's in the same spot together. And for those 2.5 hours, they don't think about their differences. It truly is probably only one of the few places where that happens culturally and spiritually, where you get people from all different places and they don't think about their differences. They only think about my team. I love the Knicks. I hate the Pistons. I love the, and I think that's the beauty of sport.
Yeah, indeed it is. Another thing that I really find fascinating, and I think it speaks to the dedication, the persistence, the ability to be able to overcome so many things related to achieving the pinnacle of sports, because it's just a small percentage of people that actually make it, and the ability to then translate those skills, that dedication over to the business side. And, I think it's really great to have these examples like yourself, Magic Johnson, who was also part of the era of sports, when you were competing at the highest level. And one of the things that stuck out to me as just what showed me like a little bit of, there's a little bit of a transition here in the future, was as the representative on the NBA Players Association, moving the average salary from $300,000 to $1.8 million in a very short period of time. Talk a little bit about that and kind of how that might have set up your ability. Was that probably was always known on your end, there were big things to come after basketball, but was that a little bit of an aha moment? Hey, I can negotiate and run circles around these folks?
It wasn't. It was an aha moment in terms of knowledge, right? And you're taught in education that immersion is the purest form of education. So those who participate and then have observation that's the purest form of education, right? Those who participate, and then you can observe. And being a participant in the sport, sitting across from the table from someone who wasn't a participant, but strictly was an observer, I didn't know that I had an advantage at the negotiating table. But once I got at the negotiating table, I quickly understood, like, everybody that I was talking to, they had no idea how you win games. You win basketball games in the locker room, at the training table, the bus ride, the plane ride, how you communicate with each other, how you feel about each other. You know, that elusive thing is called chemistry, right? And those who have chemistry, you know, you get good teammates. Of course, you need talent. But then when you're sitting across from the table and someone, they don't understand that, then it just becomes a numbers game. And they're talking numbers, but you're talking something else. But if you can understand the numbers, they can't understand what you know. There's no way, because they're not participants. So what we were able to do is, when you see the high salaries that are in the NBA now, when I was president of the Players Association, we were getting 53% of the gross. That means that every dollar that came in through the NBA, no matter where it came from, we got 53 cents on every dollar. There was no basketball-related income. There was nothing of that nature. You know, we were the first group to, our executive team was the first group to actually have the NBA give money back to the union, because at that time, WGN, which was a superstation out of Chicago, was suing the NBA because the NBA wanted a piece of those revenues that they were getting in Illinois. And they said no, so they went to court. And that's when we found out that, you know, they were selling suites for a lot higher than they had reported. So now, you know, you laid the foundation for the salaries that you see happening today. But that was a lot of hard work. And I'll leave you with this one thing. At that time, agents were taking 20% off the top of player salaries. They were taking 50% of endorsements. And as we all were reading these stories about these players who made all this money and then they were broke, right? They didn't tell you that their agents were flying private planes and sending their kids to private school because they were taking so much of the money. So what we did is and the agents, you know, some of them like me, some of them don't like me today. But what we did is we cut the agent fees from 20% to a negotiated 4%. And then we uniformed all the contracts. And then we slotted the salaries. So therefore, if you're the 12th pick in the draft, there's a uniform contract that comes with it, and there's a salary slot that comes with it. So therefore, if you want to have this guy who takes 4% or this woman who takes 4%, you can have that. But if not, you know, you can pretty much use the union as your collective bargaining agent, because that's why you pay dues.
Yeah, I love that story, and that's, you know, I think, again, to your point, people hear these stories about athletes that, you know, went broke, and I think what, to your point, is not understood is the entire economic stack of the athlete, actually the whole industry, and how that kind of comes down to the athlete. And so I think there is some appreciation that I hope is gained on your end for your ability to be able to help kind of get the players' salaries to a place where it's better participation in the economics.
I'm ecstatic about, you know, player salaries today. You know, that's when you sit at home and you say, we did our job. We did a good job. You know, you may have not gotten the money yourself, but the benefit comes from you seeing other people achieve and get a chance to take care of their families generationally. You know, when I was coming up, the term generational wealth that wasn't even in the neighborhood. That wasn't even at your table. Right. Now you have athletes talking about generational wealth, and it's transformative, and that means you did your job, and so I'm very happy about that.
So let's transition a little bit to generational wealth and how that's being accomplished on your end. And I guess with so many championships, there was a lot of either, I don't know if it was champagne or sparkling wine, but there was a lot of bubbly beverage that was sprayed around the locker rooms during your career with the Pistons. So let's talk a little bit about how that influenced your desire to get involved with a champagne company. And I love the part around your desire to find a lower sugar content. That's special to me because I try to minimize my sugar content. Yeah. But I mean, I can't get over the wine though.
Well, bear with me just for a second because before I tell you about the champagne story, let me tell you how I got into it. My first love was popcorn, and I had a popcorn company, and some of you I'm sure have had it before, but it's called Indiana Popcorn. I went to Indiana, so that red bag of kettle corn that you see on the stand, right, the cream and crimson, we were the first to put colors on the bag. When we all grew up, right, popcorn came in a clear plastic bag, and, you know, potato chips were in a plastic. You can see everything. We started putting colors on the bag, and I ended up selling that company, and when I sold that company, Clooney he had done Clooney and Friends with tequila, and he had knocked it out of the park, right, in the spirit space. So everyone was saying, you know, Isiah, you know, you should look in the spirits business and look at the spirit space. And I looked in the spirit space, but quite frankly, you know, even back there today, I looked at the wine space, I looked at the tequila space, I looked at the vodka space. And, you know, I like to win. And so I was like, you know, there's a whole lot of competition down here. There's a new wine that comes out every month. There's a new tequila that comes out every month. There's a new vodka that comes out every month. So I upticked, and I looked in the champagne space. And what I saw in the champagne space, and this is what, you know, drove me to this space, because you always have to find your niche, like what's going to be your niche. And in the champagne space, a first press champagne hadn't come to the United States in almost 50 years. Most of the champagnes that you're drinking and that you get are second and third press. Very high in sugar, very high in sulfites. Consequently, when most people drink champagne, they get a headache. I flew over to Champagne, flew over to France, met the Cherlon family. The Cherlon family's been making champagne since 1788, 9 generations of champagne makers, and had a discussion with them about bringing champagne to the U.S. During the discussion, they asked me, you know, what kind of champagne I like. I didn't know any better, so I won't mention the name of the champagne that I said, but their reaction is what really threw me off. Their reaction was like, you drink that? And in my mind, I'm paying big dollars for what I'm drinking. And they go, we don't drink that here. Ding. I said, well, next question is, well, what do you drink? And they poured out the champagne that they drink. And most of the champagnes that we get, again, are second and third press, very high in sugar. They say the American palate craves sugar. So therefore, all our products that we send to America, you know, are very high in sugar, very high in sulfites, second, third press. It's a good business. Nobody's complaining. It's selling a lot, buying a lot. Why change? I said, well, have you ever made a zero sugar or low sugar champagne? They said American palate won't take that. I said American palate has never been given a choice. And what I would like to do is give the Americans a choice of first press, low sugar, zero sugar champagne. And I sit here today and I proudly can say that Shirlan Champagne, with the highest rated zero low sugar champagne in the United States, with the highest rated first press zero low sugar champagne in the US, and currently now in 37 states and still growing. And it's been a long haul. I'm going on my 8th year now in the champagne space. And in the champagne space now, I'm the only brother that's really in this space that owns his champagne. I don't endorse it. I own it. I own 100% of the company. And since we have a lot of investors here, I'll tell you this quick story, right? So I'm sitting across the table from their lawyers, the Shirlan family and their lawyers, and I get to the point where I'm like, okay, well, I can play my minority diversity black card because in the U.S., right, every store, every organization has to hit their quota. They have to hit their points. And a lot of them are struggling to hit it. So I said to the lawyer, I said, well, this will be, the first black minority-owned company 100%. And so I see the lawyers they stop. They start looking at each other and they rattling through papers. And then the lawyer goes, what do you mean a minority-owned company? This is in France. And, so it's different in America. We're classified in the color boxes, the black box, the white box, the blue box, the purple box, the orange box, people of color box. And money is allocated that way and resources is allocated that way. My firm is called Isiah International because I do most of my business, a lot of it is outside of the United States, where I'm treated as an American, and I get to operate and breathe and work as an American. So I couldn't buy the land in France, in Champagne, because they won't let an American-owned land in the Champagne region. So I negotiated the rights to own all the grapes that come off the land. So that's why I can say I give you the first press, because my second and third press, I sell to the big houses, right? I also cultivate and grow in Colombia, where we're in the cannabis and industrial hemp space. And in the industrial hemp space, we're working closely now with Stellantis. They've given us a Jeep Wrangler to actually infuse industrial hemp into the automotive space to replace plastics in the automobiles, thus reducing its carbon footprints. In Colombia, we work with the indigenous farmers and growers. So when you talk about ESG, I had no idea what ESG meant. But when I read it, I was like, okay, that's us, So,
right.
so again, and I started the Toronto Raptors in '95. So again, a lot of my businesses have been outside of the U.S., but inside of the U.S., our products sell well, and I can announce it here. How many of you are in the cannabis space, or none? Anyway, my man. So, so there's this company here now that's called Smokies, and Smokies is in their edibles, THC, CBD, CBN, CBG, right? And they're in 300 retail stores here in the U.S. Well, and Colombia just opened up, and now we're getting ready to do 2,000 stores across Latin America, across Europe, so forth and so on. So, that's a big deal for my company, One World Products. I'm chairman, CEO of One World Products, publicly traded on the OTC right now, and the goal is one day to uplift to the NASDAQ. And this contract with Smokies gives us a big start.
It's amazing. How did that opportunity come about?
One World Products. I was, okay, so my son and my daughter, right? They are users of the plant. And I couldn't understand it. And, my daughter and my son was like, no, it has, medical benefits. And I was like, yeah, right, okay.
Sure.
But then the more I started studying it, the more I stumbled across this new thing that's changing the whole medical industry. It's called the endocannabinoid system that all of us have inside our body. We have CB1, CB2 receptors that work naturally with the plant, with the hemp plant, and also with, the plant that has THC in it. But, they're two different plants, two different grows, but given something naturally that works with your body, works with your system, and we're at a point now in time where everybody's coming back to Mother Nature. And Mother Nature has said to all human beings that if you don't change your ways in the next 20 years, Mother Nature has said, game's over. So therefore, we have to reduce our carbon. We have to get off the pills and the opioids and everything else that we've been taking synthetically, and we have to go back to the plant. So how did I get into One World Products is basically through my kids, looked at the investment, looked at the opportunity, and then said, okay, as an athlete, former athlete, knowing how, if I would have known there was a such thing as an endocannabinoid system in the 80s, I would have treated my body totally different. And now everyone in the world is treating their body totally different. I looked at a graph the other day, and they said the sixth highest grossing plant in the U.S. right now is the cannabis plant. Now, why did I choose Colombia? I chose Colombia to grow because the same reason why I chose Champagne in France. You bet on the land, you bet on Mother Nature, you bet on the sun, you bet on the soil. And in Colombia, we have the indigenous farmers and growers, we have the soil, we have the sun. So it costs us 25 cents to grow in Colombia, whereas here in the U.S., it's costing you close to $800 to grow, because in the U.S., what you have to do is basically you go into real estate business, because you have to buy a big place like this, and then you grow inside, and you got to artificially heat the plant, you got to artificially cool it. But in Colombia, we have none of that. You have Mother Nature doing it. So therefore, it's cheaper there.
Interesting. Okay, so I like the
Sorry
foresight.
for the long-winded answer.
No, I love that. How are we doing on time? Okay. So let's look ahead to some of the other business opportunities that are catching your attention. Maybe no plan to execute on them yet, but some things that just seem interesting just based on your perspective around where we're trending as society.
I think AI is going to totally revolutionize every business sector. And how do you infuse technology and AI into your business now? Because there'll be a lot of businesses that are going to be wiped out, right? There'll be a lot of, my econ teacher, Mr. Maroney, he said there's two things in business. You either selling a product or you're selling a service. And those who have products, you got a chance. Those who are selling services, AI is coming, right? So AI is going to revolutionize every single service business in the industry. So find a way to partner with AI and make AI your best friend, because 4 or 5 years from now, how about not even 4 or 5 years from now, how about a week from now? That's how fast AI moves. A week from now, there'll be an industry that's teetering, right? And the service space, I think AI is going to truly infect the service space in a major, major way. And, there'll be loss of jobs, but there'll also be opportunity, right? There's always opportunity, when everything's crumbling, right? When everything's crumbling, there's some people who say, oh, the sky's falling. Then there's some people who go, yeah, the sky's falling. Let me see. What star fell down? Oh, let me pick that one up, right? So the service industry is going to be impacted by AI. So that's what I see.
Yeah, that's.
Did I hit it right, or did I?
100% on the nose. Just got to make sure it's more of a superhero than a supervillain.
And this is where it gets back to people in society, right? It can become a superhero. I'm gonna go off base a little bit, but it can become a superhero if we can all get uplifted back to human. But as long as we in these boxes of red, white, blue, green, the black person over there, the white person over there, but if we all become human again and we collectively connect, then we can use AI kind of like how the Egyptians used it to build them pyramids. They say what's old is new, right? And I don't think we've discovered anything new, because when you look at those pyramids and you wonder how they did it with supposedly the tools that they had had some AI working for them somewhere.
Isiah, when we think about, I'll bring it back to sports just to touch on your perspective from the business side of sports. What are some of the biggest challenges that we see in sports right now? I mean, a lot of people are probably familiar with some of the activities around streaming, separate from the writers' strike and the actors' strike, but even thinking about streaming and the ESPN business and kind of where sports are headed from as someone that has a broad perspective, going from player, owner, and just so many different aspects. What are your thoughts on some of the challenges the sports industry faces?
To me, the sport at one time in all societies, in all societies, were only for the elite. The elite were the only ones who got to play sport and participate in sport, all the way back to when sport was discovered, and my fear right now is that sport only becomes for the elite. And when we look at across the board in sport, basketball, football, baseball, hockey, little kids growing up, we were fortunate enough to have volunteers. We were fortunate enough to have people who taught us the game and didn't charge us to teach us. Had I been charged to play, I grew up on the west side of Chicago, 6 brothers, 2 sisters, extremely poor, My man Jalen in here. Where you at, Jalen? Jalen, yeah. Did he leave? Oh. Well, Jalen grew up homeless, right? I was homeless a lot. We moved around. Jalen said he watched my mom's story that inspired him, to become, a homeless millionaire today, right? What I see happening in sport right now, the kids who are coming into sport, they all grew up in the country club. Everybody is elite. Everybody gets taken out of their community. They go to these private schools. They get the gym shoes. They get the, even though their families are still left in poverty, his or her experience is not an experience of poverty anymore. So the people who are making it into our NBA right now, all of these guys, when you look at, probably with the exception of LeBron, every one of the top 5, 6, 7 players, I would say KD, LeBron, those guys, they grew up in the country club. So what's going to be missing from the sport is how do the underserved make it? How does that little kid have that dream and actually make it to the NBA? And you read and you talk about that story, because those kids, when I look at the NBA right now and I look at sport, with the exception of football, those kids they're not making it. And that's my worry. That's my biggest fear.
And it's unfortunate because that was a path. Maybe it was a path that was overhyped and people should have focused in other areas. But without question, that has historically been a path to creating wealth to come out of the communities.
Yeah, in the United States, for those who are classified as black, sports and entertainment has been a space that we could navigate and make it to the top. But when you got to the top, you had the responsibility and the obligation of voicing, keyword voicing, for the people who were left in your community, because the people who were in your community never got voice and they never got the mic. So therefore, that's why when Muhammad Ali got the mic, he would speak about these issues, right? When Bill Russell got the mic, he would speak about, these issues. And those of you who are old enough, let me tell you this story about the Boston Celtics and how great the Boston Celtics are and was during that period of time. Bill Russell, 1966. Red Auerbach and the Boston Celtics. Now you gotta take the Boston Celtics and separate them from Boston City, right? Because the Boston Celtics, 1966, said to Bill Russell, "You tall, classified black man, you're going to be the player coach." In 1966. And those who are in this room that are old enough to remember what 1966 was like in America, and the Boston Celtics said, "Bill Russell, you the coach?" And then he won 3 NBA championships as player coach in Boston. That's why my mom said, we root for the Boston Celtics. Because what Red Auerbach and Bill Russell stood for during that time, 65, Malcolm X is assassinated, 63, Kennedy's assassinated, 67, another Kennedy's assassinated, 68, Martin Luther King's assassinated, 69, Fred Hampton's assassinated, and the Boston Celtics got 5 brothers on the floor, and Bill Russell is the player coach. Come on. That's big time. Yeah, that deserves some applause.
What are your thoughts on, and by the way, none of this is scripted now. These are all hot takes. What are your thoughts around the ability for collegiate players now to participate in the economics around their sports? I got a good one.
Oh, yeah, no. But it's one that I've been on for a long time. Sport and entertainment is the only business industry that operates on a plantation business model. Now that's not to say that, people are slaves and, being, but when you look at the business model of sports and entertainment, it's the only business model where there's no other place in the world that has an organization called the NCAA. And you have to go to college, and they supposedly give you a free education, room and board, and they make billions of dollars, and the people who are performing, they get nothing. And their scholarship is a contract. And they sign a scholarship contract with no legal advice. There's no attorney present. It's presented like you got a scholarship to X university. Now, I got to give it to the youth right now, because the youth have said, no more of that. We want to participate in the revenue growth of the sport. Now, here's where the NC2A is getting cued at, and this is where it gets muddy, because the NC2A now is coming back, and they literally go to court, and they use Title IX. They use Title IX as a way to keep the money for themselves. And Title IX is about gender equity, so forth and so on. So I'm glad that it's breaking. I'm glad that the athletes are getting paid. It's not enough. They deserve more. But, you know, these networks are handing out $10 billion contracts to the conferences. You see, conferences, I never thought I would see the day where UCLA and USC is in the Big Ten in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And now Cal and Stanford headed to the ACC along with SMU.
And only
the closest school to Cal and Stanford, other than SMU now, was Louisville. Insanity.
So it's all about the money. Yeah. Now, I wrote my thesis on books and basketball. I got a master's in education from UC Berkeley, and
Go Bears.
Go Bears. So when you just talked about now they have that student athlete now is getting ready to miss 4 days of school to participate in sport. And his professor or her professor is going to look at that student athlete and penalize him or her in the classroom because they think that he or she is getting a break and they didn't do their homework. They didn't come back. And every student in that classroom is looking at that athlete like, A, you got to deal with why you lost. B, you got to deal with fatigue in the classroom. And C, you got to deal with your environment is not really set up for you. If you look at most universities' athletic fields are over here. And the dorms and the campus and the educational part is over here. Now, you as a student athlete, where do you spend most of your time? Over here. So, you know, it's all about the money, and I'm glad that the athletes are getting a chance to participate in a small amount of the money. But, you know, we'll see how long the NC2A lasts.
Yeah, and no one's really also talking about the fact that obviously these alignments favor football, which gets the bulk of the revenues and has the resources to take better care of their athletes, better facilities, better transportation, chartered planes, you know, and the folks that are playing some of the lower level sports outside of the Big Three or Big Four, depending on your geographic region, those folks are going to suffer. You know, like the women's track team, you know, like what's going to happen? They're not going to have the same, they're not going to get a chartered jet to go and play in Florida.
So the way they've parsed it is revenue generating sports. Who generates the most revenue, right? And if you're generating revenue, then you can get X. And why? You know, Saturday football is on CBS, NBC, Fox, ABC, ESPN, satellite. you can't watch nothing but football on Saturday. And in football, it's the golden goose, and it's making the most money.
So, any parting words or anything that, given this group and their ability to be able to identify some of the next great companies and the folks that support them financially, I'd personally like to thank Hearst because they are an investor in our fund. Any closing thoughts to get this group really excited about tomorrow and all the great content that they'll be able to take part in and the great conversations that are going to happen?
Definitely invest in Sherlon Champagne. And if you're interested in what we're doing with One World Products, I do think that that's a company that, in my estimation, very shortly, that'll be a company that's valued at about $500 million because of the cannabis space and because of the hemp space and the infusion of in the automobile space. I would say to all of you who are investing in looking for the winner, right? As entrepreneurs, as self-starters in business, it takes us 3, sometimes 5 years to really get up and running, to get the business right. And you've invested all your hard-earned dollars, all your work and everything else. So when you're sitting across from that entrepreneur, give him or her the look, not that what's your balance sheet saying, right? Can you find a way to bet on the person? Because that person who has pushed that rock up the hill for 3 to 5 years and their revenue isn't high and they don't necessarily have all the bells and whistles behind him or her. But if that person has come from the bottom and got to this point, particularly being black and classified as black in America, he or she, if given the proper resources, where they have the marketing dollars and they can go and hire the best people, the best managers to run their business, that's when the business takes off. But if you're looking at a business and you saying, well, how much you spending on marketing? And they saying, shit, I just had to meet payroll last week. I ain't had no money to spend on marketing, right? How much money, let me look at your management team. Well, I don't have a dream team. The dream team, I can't afford the dream team. But if you give me some money, can I go hire the dream team? I think that's easy to do. Can I go find a firm to do marketing for me? I think it's easy to do. But if you're talking about pushing from zero and getting that rock uphill where you actually get a meeting with some of y'all, you actually get a meeting, you give that person a chance, forget their balance sheet, forget what, the revenues look like. But if you give that person a chance and you bet on the person, you will pick more winners than that balance sheet is talking about. That's my advice to you.
The jockey and not the horse. Isiah, thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Q&A?
Oh, Q&A?
Oh, great.
All right.
Yep. We have time for some Q&A. I will ask each of you to keep your questions succinct. We all know we like to hear stories, but keep them succinct, and it will allow everyone else to participate and ask a question so we don't run out of time. So who's going to raise their hand for the first question? We've got myself with the mic and Ross in the corner there, the young, handsome fellow. Okay, first candidate. Please just cite your name and the company you're from and then your question.
Tyler Dean. I've recently been building the family office spin out for Estee Lauder, but now I'm transitioning into doing new things. And I'm curious if you invest in the venture and growth equity ecosystem yourself, and why or why not?
So when you talk family office and you look at Isiah International, I've invested all of my dollars and all of my resources into my family. So when people talk about generational wealth, right? I came from, they say very humble means I was poor. I ain't had nothing, right? So so when I made it to the NBA, every dollar that I've earned has gone into my kids, my nieces, my nephews, cousins, their education, right? How can I get them out? Where not where they're successful, but where they just have a place to stay, they got food in the refrigerator, and they can pay their rent. So when you look at Isiah International in the small firm that I have, you see a lot of my family, nieces, nephews, son, daughter, they run in the business and they in the business. So that's why I haven't ventured outside of my sphere to invest in something else or some other spaces. The lauder space, that's a big space, and where I see us participating in that space is through the infusion of CBD into cosmetics. When you look at CBD going into the cosmetic space, I think CBD is going to be infused in almost everything that we do right now. So that's why I haven't invested or ventured out, because I've ventured in. Rick Wade, I love you. That man who get ready to ask me a question, I just want you to know, before he even ask the question, when you talking about a brother helping somebody, reaching out, patting on the back, uplifting, connecting, that brother there, hey.
Now,
Thank you.
I don't even ask a tough question now. I'm Rick Wade. Sorry, got to stand. Rick Wade, Senior Vice President of United States Chamber of Commerce. Isiah, your focus on international, I do think that's where the opportunity exists. Saudi, Gulf, Qatar, investing now in Washington sports teams, NBA Africa. Mm-hmm. Where are the opportunities for sports globally? And just curious about your take and assessment of NBA Africa.
So NBA Africa, when you talk about the economic hub and machine that Africa is and will continue to be. You mentioned Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi. I've become very close with the chairman in Abu Dhabi, and as you see, the NBA is playing a lot of games over in Abu Dhabi. But Africa itself, Africa is going through a transition where it is regaining its own identity, its own self-importance, and trying to separate itself away from the stronghold of Europe. And sport is going to be a big part of that. So when you look at the athletes that are coming out of Africa right now, and when you look at, and when you think Africa, don't think skin color, right? Because, it really is about the place, it's about the land, about what they're producing and what they're doing. The athletes that are going to come out of there, again, there's no NC2A there. There's no you got to go to college and then go to the NBA. They're high school kids, they're young players, soccer, basketball, if they ever start playing football, they get to compete right away at the highest level. So you can be 15 playing against, not playing against, I would say learning from people who are 25, 26. And that type of knowledge base, once it's infused fully into the NBA, you know, you're going to see some wonderful things.
I'm Daniel Achampun from Visible Hands, early stage investment fund that invests in diverse founders building tech businesses. My question is more about habits. You know, you played against and played with great players, you know, Magic, MJ, and all those folks. What habits did you see that they implemented that kind of gave that thread of greatness? And also, what habits did you establish for yourself to become a legend?
Thank you, and great question, because I look at, you know, in sport, you know, Magic, Jordan, the two that you mentioned, they were blessed with genetic gifts that I didn't have. And what I mean by genetic gifts, Magic was blessed with size at 6'9", you know, 250, you know, can run, jump, and Jordan 6'6" with a 49-inch vertical. Like, what was that, right? So their genetic gifts in sport allowed them to have a leg up on the competition and on the opponent from a physical standpoint, right? And in sport, you know, if you're bigger, faster, stronger, 9 times out of 10, you're going to beat the smaller person. Now, how did I win, and what did I learn? I had to be smarter, right? And the only way that I was going to beat those two, I had to depend on them to make mistakes. Because if they didn't make a mistake, there was no way that I could beat them. So every time they made a mistake, I had to capitalize on their mistake. That's what gave me an edge, you know, to stay in the game. So what did I learn from watching Magic and Kareem, and what did Jordan learn from watching all of us, was that if you don't make a lot of mistakes, victory favors the team that makes the fewest mistakes. Why is everybody so happy about Aaron Rodgers here with the Jets now? Because they know he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. He's not going to make a lot of mistakes. He's not going to turn the ball over to the other team. What made Magic so great? Magic didn't make a lot of mistakes. But when he made one, you had to be in the game long enough to take advantage of that mistake. So what I learned and what I had to do to become a champion in a big man's game was, you know, you almost had to be perfect in a lot of areas, not from shooting and passing, but knowledge-wise, who can concentrate the longest. Most basketball games, 2.5 hours, right? Most classroom settings, 40, 45 minutes until you get to college. Then you have a 2-hour class. But most athletes, in basketball in particular, they can't concentrate longer than 40, 45 minutes, and then they spin out. You know, they start imagining things or talking about, you know, they just can't hold it, right? And what I was able to do, I think that made me able to compete at their level and sometimes beat them. Well, beat them more than they beat me. I think I could concentrate longer than they could and not make as many mistakes.
Well, thank you. I think to keep us on track with our programming, I know there's more questions that you all want to raise. Equally me, I want to understand how I become an NBA player. Is it anything like soccer? Is that how it works? Yeah, probably not. So at this point...
Soccer has a very interesting business model, I'll say that.
It does, especially when it comes to Saudis. Okay. Right now, we're going to move into our next programming. I want you all to rise up and give a warm round of applause for the legendary Isiah Thomas and the equally impressive Lo Tony.